a couple that have come up.
Okay, great.
So let's start with this first one here. There's a lot of background story, so I'm gonna make it short and sweet,
Perfect.
and we can dialogue from there. So this question is specifically around scheduling. So if I'm working on something or I have a goal that I've determined and I have a certain number of habits that I am creating around that. So just for those, like whether you're joining us and this is the fifth time you've joined us or the first time, um, Martin has talked a lot about like having a kind of an overarching goal and then the habits are underneath that. So that's where I'm going with that. It's like, so let's say I have a goal and let's say I have 3 habits underneath it that I'm working toward. Is there any rhyme or reason around scheduling and when to do the habits, or how does someone figure that out?
It's an incredible question, and I think at some point we got to put together a PAR, plan, act, record, reassess, best practices.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I like that. I'm going to write that down.
Some of these questions come up over and over and over, and there's no there's no bad question. So let's kind of take it from the beginning. Yes, scheduling is super important. The reason we don't talk about it a lot, although it's mentioned in the book, is because it's up to the user. In other words, to give you an example, when I was like, holy crap, I got to write a book about this. And then I've never written a book. And then I was like, well, how are you going to write a book? Well, you're going to follow PAR. Okay, so my goal was to write a book. Then my question was, I'm not a writer. I've never written before. How am I going to do this? So I set about following PAR, and all I did was say 20 minutes 3 times a week. And then the question came up exactly where you're going. Well, what time? So if you're going to write, because I knew Mondays were out because of meetings, and so I can't remember the exact days, but let's say it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 20 minutes. Then the question is when. And I was like, well, writing, creativity, I got to do that very first thing before the rest of the day becomes so at first I started getting up, it was at 5:30, 6. Anyways, I was purposefully getting up very early just to write. And then I got into that groove and habit. And that's ultimately how I finished the book. I elevated the minimum success criteria. Obviously, I was no longer 20 minutes 3 times a week. It ended up going up 45 and then even an hour and a half over many months. But the key was getting in early for me for creative work. Now, if it's eating a salad and you want to do that at night, there's a relative time. So part of cue, routine, reward applies here because there's no better cue than a plan. But in the plan, one should envision and understand. I love this question. Someone envision and understand when you are going to do these things on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Just as a ballpark, you may not always. Right. So it could be whether it's working out, whether it's eating. I hope that hit me with any follow-up questions, but that's the gist of it. Yes, you should coordinate the timing.
I mean, right off the bat, I feel like obviously it's going to be somewhat, I mean, quite a bit, I would think, personal to the person, their style, what works for them, what their calendar, like logistically, what's going to work for them. And at the same time, I feel like not having an idea or some premeditation around it, allowing for it to just be willy-nilly, as you would say, is not a recipe for success.
It is not. And I love what you're saying. And because it's personal, I typically don't get into it, but it's still a conversation to have.
Right.
Some people are creative. They want to write. They'd be the exact opposite of me. They want to write at 10 p.m. at night with their coffee. And so, but the timing is important to the individual.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking about when I wrote my book, for me, I tend to like a little bit of a slower morning. So me getting up and going to write immediately wasn't what worked for me, but I knew what did was having a little bit of a slower morning, a little time to meditate, a little time to do a little yoga, enjoy a cacao or some lemon water or whatever, and then kind of ease into it. But I always knew that it was going to be in the morning. It was going to be part of my slow morning. And then that was going to be my writing. My writing happened in the morning, but I eased into it. So it's interesting how, like, I guess what I hear you saying is like, let's, have the person play around with, well, what is, let's go with what feels best, what fits, and also not letting it just be out there hanging on the hope that it's going to get done because you've written it down.
So good. Yeah. We don't want to, playing around is good because that's experimenting. We like that. You may think the mornings are going to work and then find that the afternoon works or the
For
night.
sure.
Point is, you won't know till you begin the process, and you have to begin somewhere with a plan. You're invited to use, I mean, most of the people that are jumping in automatic goals and goals gym are 45 at least. My point is, they know themselves, they know their circadian rhythms, they understand their energy patterns, and that's critically important. So we factored into P.A.R.R. Go ahead. You look like you got something.
I was just going to say, so Dr. Frederick is chiming in and he said being integral with the time scheduled builds up personal belief and trust in self. And I totally agree with that.
Right.
Because before, and maybe you can speak to this too, Martin, before I started writing, like you, I was like, I'm not a writer. I don't know how to do this. But then once it is built in and it's part of what you're doing and showing up, like having that space for me, showing up, it was like, no, this is what I do now. And now I am a writer.
Isn't that interesting? You remember the 3 circles? Those things.
Yes. Yeah. The story. Yep.
The story's influenced by the behavior.
For sure. And the environment. And
yeah, it works both ways.